By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled, here once the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. The foe long since in silence slept, alike the conqueror silence sleeps, and time the ruined bridge has swept down the dark stream.
You are listening to the voice of Helen Hayes reading the Concord Hymn by Ralph Waldo Emerson, a page from this Sunday's edition of Anthology. This is Fleetwood. Each Sunday at 1, WRCA, in cooperation with the Poetry Center of the YM and YWHA, 92nd Street and Lexington Avenue in Manhattan, brings you transcribed Anthology, a selection of readings from poets past and present, and the music to accompany their poetry. This week, poetry for Memorial Day, 1955. Our guests, Helen Hayes, Walter Houston, and Claude Rains. Tomorrow, America celebrates Memorial Day 1955. Originally called Decoration Day, the holiday was inaugurated on May 30th, 1868 by General John J. Logan, commander of the Grand Army of the Republic. Since then, it has grown greatly in importance in national feeling until today. Memorial Day is a day upon which we pay tribute not only to our honored dead of all the wars on the battlefields of the world, but to the heroes of the air and the men who gave their lives in the name of liberty upon the seven seas. Today, on Anthology, we'd like you to listen to a series of poems solemnly dedicated to our common belief that these dead shall not have died in vain, and to the nation for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. Miss Hayes opens our program with a beautiful and touching poem by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Here is the Concord Hymn.
By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled, here once the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. The foe long since in silence slept, alike the conqueror silence sleeps, and time the ruined bridge has swept down the dark stream which seaward creeps. On this green bank by this soft stream we set today a votive stone, that memory may their deed redeem when, like our sires, our sons are gone. Spirit that made those spirits dare to die and leave their children free, bid time and nature gently spare the shaft we raise to them and thee.
Each war has given to our nation's anthology of great poetry a poem which seems to stand as a living symbol of that tragic era. One of the best known and best loved of all memorial poems was written by Walt Whitman as a tribute to the death of Abraham Lincoln at the close of the Civil War, a poem which even today still retains its original beauty and pathos. Walter Houston reads, "O Captain, My Captain," in which Whitman compares the nation to a ship tossed upon stormy seas, and Lincoln as the captain who has brought the vessel safely to shore, only to die before he reaches port. Here is Walter Houston.
Oh, Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wreck. The prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh, heart, 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 oh, the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen, cold, and dead. Oh, Captain, my Captain, rise up and hear the bells. Rise up, for you the flag is flung. For you the bugle trills. For you bouquets and ribboned wreaths. For you the shores are crowding. For you they call, the swaying mass, their eager faces turning. Here, Captain, dear father, the arm beneath your head. Is it some dream that on the deck you've fallen cold and dead? My captain does not answer. His lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my arm. He has no pulse nor will. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage closed and done. From fearful trip the victor ship comes in with object won. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells. But I, with mournful tread, walk the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead.
We'll return to our special Memorial Day program of poetry in just a moment with Builders of America, a patriotic cantata based on the poem by Edward Shenton, narrated by Claude Rains, with music composed and conducted by the late Harl MacDonald. Since the official debut of Monitor, NBC's spectacular new weekend radio program, is Saturday, June 18th, Anthology's final program will be the week of June 12th, 2 weeks from today. Next week, as a complete departure from our more serious verse, we invite you to enjoy the comedy and the delightful music of Archie and Mehitabel, a back-alley opera with words by Joe Darien, music by George Kleinsinger, based on the poetic vignettes of Don Marquis. We can promise you a thoroughly enchanting 30 minutes with Eddie Bracken as Archie, Harold Channing as Mehitabel, and David Wayne as your narrator. That's next week on Anthology, Archie and Mehitabel. For the final week of our program, we'd like to repeat the poems which you have enjoyed most during our anthology series. Just jot the titles down on a card, send them to us, and we'll be happy to include your selections on Anthology for Sunday, June 12th. One word of caution, however. Remember the time limits of our show. Since we'd like to play more than one of your favorites, we can't possibly schedule such long narrative poems as The White Cliffs of Dover or the Spoon River Anthology. There are, I'm sure, many shorter works, though, which you've remembered from our series and would like to hear again. So just drop us a line, Anthology, in care of the station to which you're listening, and tell us the poem or poems you'd enjoy hearing on our final program, the week of June 12th. In his cantata, Builders of America, the late Harl MacDonald has created a superb setting for the simple, moving words of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. This stirring composition is highly appropriate for the solemn holiday which we shall celebrate tomorrow, since it's a heartfelt reminder of the lofty ideals for which Washington and Lincoln and all free men have fought and died. Builders of America was inspired by a poem by Edward Shenton, which originally appeared in the Saturday Evening Post. It was at Mr. MacDonald's suggestion that they collaborated on the cantata. The text was expanded and the narrative added to bring the work to its present form. As the major selection on our Memorial Day program, here is Harl MacDonald's Builders of America, narrated by Mr. Claude Rains, with the late composer conducting the Columbia Chamber Orchestra and Chorus.
The hearts, the minds, the hands of these two men, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, held the love of humanity, vision of freedom, and strength of bone and sinew which conceived and built this great republic. Listen, vast plains and prairies, massive mountain ranges, wide rivers, oceans and inland seas, forests and deserts. Listen, proud towered cities, small crossroad towns, lonely farms, village and hamlet. Listen, descendants of those who came first to this prophetic land, English, French, Dutch, Swedes and Spaniards, and all those who followed, Germans, Irish, Scotch, Italians, all nationalities from every country on the earth. Hear, all you Americans, the words of the man who founded this nation. George Washington said, "Unhappy it is to reflect that the once happy and peaceful plains of America are either to be drenched with blood or inhabited by slaves." But can a virtuous man hesitate in his choice? He said, "As the Congress desires, I will enter upon the momentous duty and exert every power I possess in their service for the support of the glorious cause." Washington said, "Having finished the work assigned me, I close by commending the interests of our dearest country to the protection of Almighty God." Washington and Abraham Lincoln spoke with the voice of eternal truth, and their words, like the cry of the eagle, come to us over the years on the great wind of time. Hear, all you Americans, the words of the man who preserved this nation. Abraham Lincoln said, "I'm not ashamed to confess that 25 years ago I was a hired laborer mauling rails, at work on a flatboat, just what might happen to any poor man's son. I want every man to have his chance." He said, "Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it." Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, said, "I leave you hoping that the lamp of liberty will burn in your bosoms until there shall no longer be a doubt that all men are created equal."
We, the living, inheritors of this great nation, reaffirm the faith of our immortal dead, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Listen. These are the words of liberty. Freedom from want. Freedom from fear. Freedom to worship. Freedom of speech. Spoken for all men, of every race, color, and creed, to the ends of the earth, for all time.
Next week on Anthology, Archie and Mehitabel, a back-alley opera by Joe Darien and George Kleinsinger, starring Eddie Bracken, Carol Channing, and David Wayne. Anthology is produced by Steve White, written and directed for WRCA by Draper Lewis. This is Fleetwood wishing you good luck and good reading.